welcome everyone to tonight's Citizens Climate University. It's a weekly webinar training program of Citizens Climate Lobby that provides CCL volunteers like you and I with access to in-depth training opportunities on topics relating to climate change and effective climate advocacy. I'm your host, Brett Cease, and tonight's topic is going to focus on recommendations for texting your CCL group. So let me introduce our esteemed speakers. The lineup here beyond myself is the wonderful IT director for our organization, none other than the one and only Ricky Bradley, who serves as Information Technology Director for Citizens Climate Lobby. Prior to joining CCL, Ricky served as Director of Quality Assurance and Communications for the world's third largest bank. Might not have known that. Feel free to ask him that when we get to Q&A too. He graduated from Auburn University. He does not have a bias towards Auburn in any sports-related field. With a degree in communications, he's also received a master's in business administration with a concentration in strategy and entrepreneurship from SMU. Sandwiched between degree programs, Ricky studied information technology at UNLV. So we are lucky to have Ricky join us, and he is going to back me up on a lot of things because I sometimes get over my skis, and I want to make sure I've got our IT team here making sure that what I'm saying here is copacetic. So if we've done our job well in the next hour together, you're going to walk away feeling more confident having reviewed the process for setting up a remind.com account. You'll also understand the importance behind CCL's data privacy considerations and how you can implement those in your own practice of this group texting recommendations. And you'll be able to start taking action and use this training to get your own local chapter set up with a remind.com account. So our agenda is pretty straightforward. We'll start with a basic grounding on why we're talking about this. I'll then pass it to Ricky and we'll review some of those important considerations when we talk about data privacy. I'll then walk you through step by step from the very beginning on registering for your account. I'll review some of the menu options, how to get started, and then we'll pause for some final recommendations before jumping into Q&A. Why do you think we are focusing on texts? The two things that have motivated us to really focus on this tonight, one of which comes from just listening to our volunteers, which is something that, believe it or not, CCL tries to do. And we are doing this because, believe it or not, asking for a group texting service has historically been CCL community's most common feature request. So more people have asked for this over anything else in our forums. And so you've asked, and we are listening. And hopefully after tonight, you will finally have that little check mark next to this box in the feature request form. The other fascinating thing, and if you're interested in a full study report on this, I put a link to it in the speaker notes on this slide, is that there is a real generational preference divide, at least, in terms of how people like to receive their information. And at least with this one study that we're citing here, again, every study is a little bit different, but out of 500 individuals that were randomly sampled and surveyed, 88% of the millennials that included on that survey said that they preferred being texted information over receiving the same information via a phone call, which is our bread and butter in CCL, as we all know. So if we are interested in reaching out and really engaging the people on our rosters, this is a wonderful opportunity and avenue to explore, and so we'll do that. We'll do just that tonight. So without further ado, though, I'll pass it to you, Ricky, and we'll make sure to jump in before we review remind.com, some larger considerations, again, in how we manage our data.
Yep, thanks, Brett. Thanks to everyone for their interest on this topic and just in general for all your organization efforts. That's where all the real work happens out there, and I know and I appreciate it. Previously, Brett mentioned I worked for a bank, but my background and I guess why I've been quasi-appointed a data protection officer here, even though we're not required to have one at CCL, is because of that background that I have as well. So it really blends in well with the IT work. So I wanted to quickly touch on some boring regulations so that you as leaders have a refresher on protecting user data and how to make use of it if you're texting your chapter supporters. And my part's going to take here about 2 minutes. So let me just get started. So let me start with the boring definition: personally identifiable information. And what is that? And that's any type of data that could be potentially used to identify a person. And examples of that CCL collects would include supporter's name, their street address, their email address, or their phone number. And like, these are the things that we want to make sure that we're protecting and only sharing with the people that need to know that type of information. Things that that's not personally identifiable, like your district, your member of Congress, the state you live in, not necessarily something that's personally identifiable. So it's really that stuff that can easily identify a person. And the thing about CCL and personally identifiable information, there's a lot of three-letter acronyms right there, right? CCL and PII, is that in the US, PII is regulated, but it's regulated very poorly, if you like, through some FTC things. And it really has differences between states and stuff. And so what we really wish is that we were a lot more, in this case, like the European Union, which has this new standard that they rolled out a few years ago called the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR. And it's a really strict standard for how data should be collected and handled, stored, how you get rid of it if a user wants you to get rid of it, all these things. And so CCL has made a decision as an organization that we're going to try to comply with the GDPR versus trying to understand all the different state and federal regulations that are in the US, because the GDPR across the board is just a stricter standard, and it's what most of the world is moving towards. So that's where we're going as far as how we collect human information. Now, in everyday language, what does this mean for our compliance at CCL? And this is how you can explain it, is that we only provide personally identifiable information to leaders in our organization to conduct the work of CCL. We have a big old huge privacy policy that says this in about, probably 10,000 words, but that's in general the standard that we apply. And we also trust our leaders' judgment. So we trust you and everyone out there that's organizing to do what's best for your situation, as long as you understand that you should only use that information in order to conduct the work of CCL. So how does that apply sometimes to vendors? So Brett's going to talk to you about a vendor tonight that we've vetted and we've looked at. And we do this all the time with our vendors. Like we do it with Salesforce and Google, for example, even Gmail. And there's always two hurdles that they have to clear. First is we have to know who owns the data and who controls the data. And so we should have full control because it is our data. We're using their service to provide a service to our volunteers, but it's our data. We should have control. We should be able to export, delete, all those things. And the other thing that we have to overcome, or they have to overcome, is that the only purpose is to provide a service to us. So they can't share the data with anyone else. And it's tricky because reading through some of those privacy policies in terms of service agreements, they're intentionally vague at times. I mean, our privacy policy is pretty vague at times as well. But we review privacy policies before we start doing business with them. And Brett's going to talk about this service again that we've vetted. But what I want to say, the last thing I want to say, and just leave you with, other than make sure that leaders are using the data to do the work of CCL, like that's the main thing to take away here. But the other thing is that we don't want you, I'm sure there'll be other times that you'll look at, oh, maybe there's this service, remind.com, that Brett's going to show us tonight. And, oh, you found another service, and I want to try this service and that service. That's all great. What we would say though is do not do that until you've come to us first and let us take a look at that organization and that service to make sure that it meets the regulations and clears those two hurdles. Because we don't really expect you to have to be out there keeping up with federal and state and GDPR guidelines. That's not what you need to be doing. You should be doing the important things that you're currently doing, which is out there organizing the world. So keep doing that. Send the questions to us. If we're getting a ton of them, we're probably not gonna have time to review them, but we can certainly review the one-offs and see what they're like. With that, I'm gonna turn it over to Brett, and he's gonna take you through and show you remind.com.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I think that's something that we've definitely wanted to prioritize, and hence kind of our decision making here with why remind.com. You can also start setting up your account if you want to do a side-by-side and exit out of full screen and go to remind.com to start experimenting while I'm talking you through this. All right, so why did we choose remind.com? Well, there's three main reasons. And again, there's plenty of wonderful vendors out there that offer group texting services. But these three really rose to the top for us in the criteria behind our decision for remind.com. The first was that we wanted to choose something that was free to you, that was industry tested, and that was easy to use. We also wanted to make sure that it provided one-way messaging. And by that, we mean rather, we've all been on group text where somebody decides to loop us in with 20 other people, and all of a sudden you're like, how do I get out of this? And it's just an annoying experience. This is intentionally set up so it's a one-way flow. You are the arbiter and the controller of that information. Nobody else sees what you are sharing in that text stream beyond the one individual who's opted in. And we'll show that process in a bit. But again, this complies with our commitment to making sure that we're not overwhelming volunteers with a stream of additional communication that they didn't comply with, because after you send that first invite text, if people don't respond or if they say no, that's it. Remind.com leaves them alone, and they even remember for you later on. If you don't remember, for example, or if you re-upload and try adding their number again, it's not going to prompt them over and over again to try joining. So that's really key in making sure that we're being true to our commitment to minimizing communication. We also want to make sure that this was built for response capability. So it wasn't just shouting out into a vacuum. If people did have a question or they wanted to follow up with your invite, there is a feature, and we'll show you in a little bit here, where you can basically see and manage the responses. Most of the time, people aren't going to say anything. But if they do, for example, text back and say, hey, this link didn't work, or I'm here 3 hours early, where's the birthday party? You name it. As some of our people might know, there's a way for you to get back. So with those criteria in mind, let's explore what this looks like to get it set up on your end. So I'm going to go over the 7 steps for registering. And I'd warn that each of these is pretty easy. We did test this out with different group leaders beforehand, and the experience so far has been very user-friendly. So number 1, the first thing that you want to do is sign up. And to do that, you simply go to remind.com. And then in the upper right corner, just like you might see in a bunch of other websites, there are 2 choices. You can log in, and once you obviously have your registration set, that's where to go to log in. And then if you're new, you can click that blue sign up button, and you'll see this prompt to create an account. It reminds you to enter your email or phone number. If you enter your phone number at first, they still do require an email later on. And one other note here, I am reviewing the desktop module. I'm not tonight going to go into the app because it's very similar, and because there's differences between Android and iPhone users. Once you know this overlay on the computer or the desktop setup, you should be able to find the same things on your iPhone or your Droid app if you choose to go that way. All right, so number 2, after you've registered, they, as in remind.com, will send you a confirmation email for you to then respond to by entering a 4-digit code. It may take a minute or 2 for that to show up in your inbox or your phone, be texted if that's a way that you went. But either way, type in that code once you get it and click continue. Nice and straightforward so far, right? After that, you want to make sure to enter your name and password. Now, at this juncture, you can represent yourself as your group leader. That's what we'd recommend. You can also set it up so that it is your CCL group's account too. So either way, just type in your first, last name and set up your own custom password of your choosing. Make sure to store that so you can access it later, and then click complete sign up. Number 4, nice and straightforward. If you want to make sure before you commit to using this vendor, Remind makes it very easy for you to read through their terms of service and privacy policy. And for you, you have the choice right at that point after you've read through that. If you don't like what you see, you can easily choose to decline and go your own way. You don't have to, again, use Remind. But for people that are curious, I put a link to both of those URLs in the chat right now. You can start scanning through them if you're interested. If you do opt in, you can click accept. And the great thing, especially about those terms of service, is that it actually provides a true column view. One side is the legalese. The other side is for each paragraph, the common lay person's interpretation of that. So it's really accessible and you understand what you're signing up for. All right, so step number 5, you are asked by Remind.com to tell you a little bit more about yourself. So a little bit of background behind Remind.com. Actually, even in my own prior life, before CCL, I was a social studies educator, and this was my first exposure with Remind.com. It's educational based. So they're going to ask you which of these 4 roles best defines who you are and how you intend to use this tool. And I would recommend choosing teacher. In fact, that's really the only way that this is going to work effectively. You are essentially a teacher, you are an organizer. It's listed out right here in this description. So click on I'm a teacher, and that will advance you to the next step. Again, on that step number 5, select I'm a teacher. If you haven't provided your email, at this point, remind.com will ask you for that as well. And again, you'll be setting up your primary email address. We recommend using the same email that you use as your community login. That way it's nice and straightforward and easy to remember, and you don't have to juggle which email is being used for what within your CCL duties. But just enter that email if you didn't do that from step 1, and they'll send that same code to confirm. And then that's it. Step 7 is getting started. So let's actually do just that, and we'll show you from this left-hand navigation menu, once you get to that, what you can do. You're going to see this option under Add a Class. We'll walk through how you can create a new class next. All right, so let's get started. All right, so a couple of key considerations here right off the bat. In creating your class, here is the prompt that you'll see. We recommend naming it similar to how you would name or how you reference your group in terms of how it shows up on community or even on the public CCL website. I recommend putting CCL right up front. That way people know what it is. And then using your 2-letter abbreviation for your state, and then your city or your community's name. So in this case, CCL, Minnesota, Smallville. Now below that, the class code is only 10 characters or less. And I'll get into kind of what that class code entails in just a little bit. So you can see it doesn't allow me to have that same name. Use your best judgment how you want to set up your class code so that it's 10 characters or less, but still representative of what you're using this code for, or you're using this account for. And then your option obviously is you're not affiliated with a school, so that will be what you click. You are then guaranteeing that you're only messaging people that are 13 or older. This is again a really key consideration for data privacy rules. And then once you've checked that and you've been able to comply with each of these descriptions, that create button at the bottom will become ungrayed, and you can click it to begin. So the one other thing to consider is that remind.com, because it's free, has a couple of stipulations. One of those is that for each class, you can only add and confirm up to 150 people each. And so never fear, that total isn't the total of invites that you send. And that basically entails 150 people that have opted in and clicked yes, basically, when they are replying to the invite. But should you exceed that, I know that we have several chapters that are obviously in the upper hundreds of individuals. You are more than welcome to create additional classes and then replicate the same message. That's what I use actually for my text reminding for these training programs on Tuesday and Thursday night. But with that, just know that you have the choice right from the get-go. Maybe you only want to test this out at first with your active volunteers. Maybe you only want to test it out with a subset of people so that you're not overloading and kind of having to juggle more than one class at first. It's up to you, but that is a design constraint that we want you to be aware of up front. So now you might be asking, okay, so I've got my class or my group text vehicle set up. How do I actually import my CCL volunteers into remind.com? Well, that's a basic 3-step process. First, you want to go to your roster in CCL Community. Here's the URL. You can just search in Community for roster. This does obviously presume that you have access to that roster. If you're listening in and you don't have access, then work with your group leader or one of your chapter admins who can do this for you. Once you go to that roster, you want to click on the Export tab. Right there across the top, you can see all these different tabs. Click on Export, and then at the very bottom of that export, you want to have the chance to then select Export to CSV. So click on that, and then it will download however you've specified to your computer downloads from your browser into basically a spreadsheet file. So that's step number 1. Number 2 is pretty straightforward. If you don't even want to do all this, you don't have to. Basically, we need to clean up the data so that you have 2 columns that you're importing into remind.com. All right, so the first step that you want to make sure to achieve is in cleaning your roster, you want to sort out people that have said no to opting into text messaging. And what we are going to do to achieve that is after you've opened your roster spreadsheet, you want to go to column Z, and you can see that here on the right-hand side of the slide. You want to, on that column, sort the list so that all, you can sort it alphabetically A to Z so that all of the no's rise to the very top. And that just means that these are people that when given the prompt have chosen to not opt into text messages. So we're actually going to, once we've sorted column Z, highlight all of the rows from the very top down to the very end of this list of no's. It might be 2 people, it might be 40. You're going to delete those individuals from being added to your roster. And that's just to be respectful since they've already said, hey, I don't opt into national text alerts. We're going to presume that they also would prefer not to opt into local text alerts. So what to do there is click on the rows on the very far left row column to highlight each of these entries for people that have opted, who have chosen not to opt in, and then just click delete. And that should winnow down your list to who's most appropriate. Question might come up too, what about people that don't have any entry on that column Z column, whether they've opted in or not? If that column is blank for the individual, no need to delete them. You can add them. That just means that they haven't chosen either way. So we don't want to presume that they don't want to be added. But the end result is that you are going to copy and paste 2 columns, the name field and the mobile phone number field. And so if you want to use concat as kind of an Excel function, what you'll do is you'll create a new column. You can right click right next to last name, and it says, it gives you an option to say insert column to right. You click on that, and then I titled it full name. You can do whatever you want. But then you copy this code in. And basically what this does is it says, take the field in B2, add a space, and take the field in C2, and then put them together. And what do you got? You got the full name right there. So you can see this in application here. Example 1 is combined into example 1. All right, and so the final thing, once you clean your roster that we've reviewed, is to highlight the list of individuals that you want to add. Now, remind.com, when you're copying and pasting in, doesn't want you to add the column header. So for example, here, full name and mobile are the 2 column headers I have. Don't actually copy those headers in. Start with row number 2, and you can just click and drag those 2 columns to control and copy all that you want all the way down, and then paste them, as I'll show you on the next slide, into your remind.com add people. Going back to your remind.com browser, in the upper right, once you've created your account and you're logged in, you'll see a little prompt that says add people. You click on that, and then you have the choice basically to enter contacts from copy and paste. You can use a sheet if you want to directly do that from Google or Microsoft Excel. I would encourage you, you're welcome to use the Students tab. If you click on Parents, sometimes that avoids having to confirm with the people that you're adding whether or not they're 13 or older. If you're presuming that people in your group are 13 or older, you're welcome to use that Parents tab, or you can just keep on the default Students, and you basically click Command V or Control V, depending on if you're a PC or a Mac user at that point. So you're going to paste those columns in. And then what you'll see here basically is a list of individuals that you have cleaned up in your data. And once you're happy with that, it might prompt you with a little red box that says, hey, this is incomplete, or this isn't the right phone number, or this person's missing a name, you name it. You might have to tidy up your data just a little bit more. If you didn't do that in the prior step, you're going to click add people. And that is it. What happens then is that remind.com takes over, and they send those invites to anyone that you've added. And they're only going to appear in your list once they've confirmed or accepted being added. All right. So that is the basic 3-step process for downloading, cleaning, and uploading your roster data. After you've done that, please delete your CSV file. so that you don't have that stored anywhere. Again, that sensitive, personally identifiable information that Ricky just talked about. We want to make sure that we don't have any loose copies of everyone's information hanging around on your desktop or wherever you might have stored that data after downloading it. Use it to enter into remind.com and then delete the file. There's a couple of other ways that Remind offers you to allow people to join without you manually adding people. And you can see that option actually in the left-hand column once you've clicked Add People. I have gone over the phone or email contact option, but Remind.com also gives you actually a fun little printable PDF design that you can see right here. It's going to be customized based on your code. So remember, I chose my little class code as @Smallville. It can be whatever you want, but that's going to be how people can join. There's a quick join for this group text messaging by just entering the number 81010 and then texting at whatever your class code is to join or opt in that way. And you can also send the simple URL anywhere, remind.com/join/your-class-code. So that's the share a link option. From the user experience, what does this look like, right? So you want to know what you're actually asking your volunteers to be subjected to if you're going to use remind.com. We want to show you, at least at this moment, again, remind.com reserves the right to update their messaging at any point. But as of July 29th, 2021, this is what that experience looks like from the end user perspective. If they have been invited in, they are going to receive a little invite. Hi, your name. This is your example group. I'm using this service to send important updates. Reply yes to avoid missing messages from your group's name. Again, here it is. You can reply no if you don't want to receive messages, nice and clear from the get-go. And at that point, if they say no, remind.com says, thanks for letting us know. We won't bug you again. If they do say yes, you'll see a basic follow-up that says, here's our thread. At any point, if you want to leave, that's totally your right. Just text back @leave. And you'll be unsubscribed. You can actually, even if you've sent this out to prior people and then are adding additional people later on, have them see earlier messages. Now, obviously they don't need to. This is a little demonstration of the script that we've sent our core volunteer training from. So there's a lot of messages to catch up and nobody's expected to do that. So let's just say they say yes. What does that look like then? Well, if you haven't given remind.com their name, they're going to ask that individual to import their name. If you've already put that in with their phone number, then they won't be prompted that. They're going to ask you a quick question. Again, this is a restriction because it is an educational tool and free, mind you. They're going to have to indicate if they're a student, parent, or teacher. If this is confusing, or if you feel like people might be confused, you can also send them an individual text on your own to clarify what that means. You can review it at your next group meeting so that people know what to expect, but all they have to do is reply simply with an S, P, or T. If they reply back with an S, what they're going to ask you next is one final confirmation, and that is to make sure that they aren't messaging minors that are under 13. And that's again to comply with remind.com's data privacy policy. So they'll just have to enter their birthday and prove that they're older than 13.
The only thing I would say, yeah, the question about people being 13 years old is important for online child protection or privacy regulations. I think it's COPA is what it's called. And they're not storing their information. They're not asking for people's date of births and stuff like that. So they're just trying to make sure that they are in compliance with that law and that, you know, in us as well. So that's the only thing I would add to that.
All right, given that we've just shown you what the user experience looks like, let's just think through real quick how you might let your group know that you're going to set up a remind.com account and invite your volunteers to be a part of it if they're interested. Given that this is going to be a new text coming from a new number with those two default texts that you don't have control over, inviting them to participate and download the app and all of that, it makes sense for you to make sure to give your group a heads up. You could let them know during your next group meeting so that they can trust that that is coming from a reputable source. You could let them know via your next group email. We wouldn't recommend sending out a separate, just one-time email on this one heads up, but include this at the top of your next notice if you want. You could post in your group's forums or wherever else you really manage your group's communication stream. And really, the whole goal here is by providing a little flag and saying, hey, we are going to be trying this out. We'll roll this out with our active users, or however you want to decide to give people an advance notice. It's going to minimize confusion, which hopefully will mean less emails for you to have to respond to if people are curious. And it'll also lead to a higher uptake. So more people are going to trust it, they'll know what to expect, and they'll make sure to click on that yes, so they're opted in. So with that, let's talk about the 4 main menus, and then we'll take the questions, because I know I have a lot of questions in the chat, and we're going to save most of the time here tonight for that after the next 5 minutes. All right, so sending your messages, we've got 4 prompts across the top on your user screen. Let's review each of them briefly. To send a message, you're going to click on that message option, and then at the bottom, there's a new announcement feature, and that gets sent to everyone on your class roster. Only volunteers that have said yes or have opted back in are going to receive that. Those are the only people that are going to be displayed in that people tab. And the great thing also about remind.com messages is that you can schedule them. So you don't have to just remember like, oh, right before my group meeting, I'm going to send a little, 1 hour ahead of time reminder. You could type in your message and then click this little hourglass icon and specify when you want it sent. So you have control over that too. You can send it the day ahead of time. You can send it 3 hours ahead of your meeting. However you think is best. You can even ask your group their preference. But that's the schedule feature. It's under this little hourglass icon. The other thing I want to clarify with messages is that you are restricted to 150 characters, just like any other texting service, right? So you don't want to overload your message with a bunch of superfluous information. You only want to have the bare essentials, And so you can see right here, here's my sample invite. I'm 88 characters over. It'll tell you, hey, you have to scale back by this many characters before we're actually going to allow you to send. So that's a really helpful feature. Again, recommendation is just the basic invite details, time, location, place, and if you've got some kind of online meeting space, how to click to join. And then click send or click schedule, and that will be scheduled out and send when you indicate you want it sent. Files is probably the least helpful of these 4 tabs. The only thing that really stores is if you've included any kind of a URL or a link. If you want to look back at your archives of what you've sent in the past, here's again the files that we've sent. Include the link to join us tonight like you already have with this Zoom code. And if you click actually on one of these, you'll see a little reminder of what that message said. So that's files. People, if you click on that people tab, basically shows everyone on your roster or your class group, their name, their date join, and their status. And let's just say, for example, people can't figure out and they're responding back and saying, hey, take me off, or I don't know how to really interact with this. Well, you can individually send that person a message. Let's just say Abby is wanting to know a little bit more hand-holding. You can send her the specific blue button right there. You can also remove them from a class. If they're having a hard time doing it on their own and they're requesting it, or for whatever reason that they don't want to be on the text stream anymore, click on that drop-down 3-dot box, and there's a remove from class option. And that's basically people. And then lastly, here's some key settings that we want to review. So you click on settings in the upper panel, and then from there, you can change your avatar. Remind.com only allows you to, send or set an avatar that they have. You can't import like a CCL logo. So this globe one is nice and earth friendly, right? You can update your class name, your class code, your school affiliation at any point. Right from there, like we reviewed at the beginning. Here's the key considerations right below that we want to make sure that you are sending, setting up correctly. We want to make sure that you are having this set up so that role-based messages are in place. That's the default. And that makes it possible for you to only send one messages. We don't want everyone to be able to message each other. That's what your group's forums are. That's other venues. That can get pretty crowded, and we don't want to all of a sudden have a lot of different text streams to manage. So keep that on role-based. That's what that one's about. And then lastly, if you want to add another administrator to your text group, that's where you can do that under class ownership. It's under class owner.
You can also archive the class if you want to, and end this setting if for whatever reason in the future it's just too much to maintain, or you want to do a different service. So that's settings. All right, so here's the final slide before we get to Q&A. We've saved roughly about half of our overall hour together for this, and that is this. So with your recommendations, please keep your text reminders clear and short. Only have the information that you need. We don't want you to send like 3 texts in a row. Don't try to game the system by saying, oh, I can't fit everything in 150 characters, so I'm just going to send 5 texts right in a row with 150 characters each. Distill down what you want to say into that one text and keep it clear and precise. We only want to be using this once, maybe twice each month. We're not asking for this to be a new service that you're sending out every new co-sponsor on, every new item that you might have for a local news update. Restrict yourself to using it once or twice monthly, please. You want to make sure you have a setup so that you're checking for responses so that people aren't shouting back into the vacuum, whether it's you or somebody else that you add as another co-owner. Make sure that at least at the frequency that you're sending texts, you're also going through and checking for responses. And the great thing is that remind.com in that messages tab shows a little red dot or a notification if you have any unresponded to messages or responses that you need to get back to. So it's a quick way that you can scan to see, and those bubble up to the top. And then the last thing that we want to encourage you to do is not to overlap with CCL National Text Alerts. For example, with this Senate action campaign right now, CCL National is already handling that. So it's going to be confusing for a user if they're getting both a reminder from national and your local group to do the same thing. It's going to frustrate the user. They're most likely to probably even opt out of one or both of them because they can't figure out which stream to manage. Why am I getting the same redundant message? If you're not sure of what CCL is texting nationally, you can sign up for that text alert if you're not already signed up. And that short link is right here, cclusa.org/text. So please make sure to keep your announcements or invites to the local level and leave national actions to CCL national text alerts. And again, if you're unsure or you're not quite figuring this out, we've reviewed a lot of information. We're going to stay on for Q&A tonight, but you're more than welcome and all ahead to ask anything in the forums. We'll get you to the right forum if you post anywhere. And obviously, we're here to help troubleshoot and support. For your feedback, you can ask Ricky or myself. And my email is simply Brett, my first name, @citizensclimate.org. Ricky's is IT@citizensclimate.org. It's not ET. He's not an alien. It's IT for information technology. And if you have questions, you're more than welcome to also post them on the forums. In fact, I often encourage that if I get an individual question, that way anyone else that might be curious gets the benefit of the response. And that is simply going to our forums and then putting in Ask Us Anything or wherever you think is appropriate. So have fun out there. I hope that you found tonight useful and empowering, and especially for those that have been waiting for a long time on a service that we've settled on. We're really looking forward to hearing how you find this useful. So thank you again, and so good to see everyone. Have a safe rest of your week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration. And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.